be back in Hillside. Yeah. I have a long history with Hillside. That's because I'm old, mostly.
Join the club.
That's a good thing.
There's a guy that went into a restaurant and was looking around. He's a single guy. Noticed this really cute girl a couple chairs over, and so he's kind of looking at her, looking away, looking at her. And this cute girl, she sneezed, and her she had a glass eye and it popped out. And out of just surprise, he reached out and caught it. And no one else had noticed, so he gently sauntered over there and he handed it back to her, and she goes, "Oh, I am so embarrassed. Can I buy you lunch?" And he goes, "Oh, don't be silly. No, you know." And so she puts her eye back in, and he goes, "Can I have lunch with you?" And she says, "Sure." And so they get there and they start talking. They got lots of things in common. He likes this, she likes that, and they were going back and forth. And another hour and a half goes by, and they have a great time. And the guy says, "Man, I would love to go out with you again, or meet and go out with you one time." And she goes, "I would love that too." He goes, "But I got to be honest with you. This was so easy and so natural. Are you this way with every stranger you ever meet?" And she goes, "No, to be honest, you're the first guy that's ever caught my eye."
That's good.
So I wanted to talk to you today, not about that. That has nothing to do with anything. But I want to give you 6 reasons why we should be able to trust God and why it would be good for us to start trusting Him now. Number 1, He knows your name. My first scripture is Isaiah 43:1. "But now thus saith the Lord that created thee, O Jacob, and thou hast formed thee. O Israel, fear not, for I have redeemed thee, and I have called thee by thy name, and thou art mine." We serve a God that not only knows that we're part of creation, but He actually knows our name. I don't know if any of you have seen The Price is Right, but I'm sure most of you have seen it at some point. And everyone in The Price is Right is a participant of the game, and they're watching it and they're enjoying it. But when they finally say, "And Randy, come on down," all of a sudden you go from participant to actually playing the game. And the whole game changes. And when God looks down on earth, it's not that we're all of just a big crowd of people, but He actually knows your name. And it says that He created you. And the person that creates brings value to whatever is created. In other words, if we had 2 canvases, say, and canvases cost, I don't know, $10. I don't know what they cost, because I'm not an artist. And you put Pablo Picasso by one, every stroke that goes on there makes that canvas more expensive, because he's painting on it. If I start painting on it, the canvas goes down in value, because now no one else can use it. So who creates the art, or who creates the person, or who gives it greater value? And this person that has created you knows your name. You're not a stranger out there. You're not a person that He's never seen before, but He knows you and He knows your name. And anytime we're in a crowd, the second someone uses your name, all of a sudden you hear. Although you might not hear anything else going on, but when someone starts saying, "Where's Randy? Where's Randy?" all of a sudden I'm looking around, even if they're talking about someone else. But He's a God that created you and that knows you by name. So one of the reasons we should trust Him is because He's not a stranger to us. He knows us. He's seen us in good times and in bad. He knows who you are. The second reason we should be able to trust God is because He will fight for us. Number 2, because He will fight for us. Now, Exodus 14:14 says, "The Lord will fight for you." This I use NIV, so a little hard to speak Old English for me. "The Lord shall fight for you, and ye shall hold your peace. I've been reading a book on the Revolution War, and it's interesting how we became a nation that we became. Because in the beginning, in Boston, when they were taxing the colonies, when the English was taxing us, they didn't really want to become their own nation. What they really wanted was they wanted representation. They wanted people from the colonies to be able to go to England, and whenever they were talking about the colonies, that we'd have someone to represent us in that forum. And but they didn't have any American colonies in there, and so the people of Boston were tired of all these taxes that were being put upon them. And so, of course, we know that the Boston Tea Party started, but then after the Tea Party happened, English sent many more troops, and we were so outnumbered and we were so outgunned. They had a navy in England, and we had not one ship. They had thousands of soldiers, and we had a few militias in different places. They were trained men, we were farmers. They had cannons, and they had all kinds of armaments. We were so outmaneuvered, we were so outnumbered, we were so outgunned. And yet, what happened during the Revolutionary War would change history for the last 200 and some odd years. But I was thinking of Bunker Hill and how we fought them a lot harder than they expected. But then after they had won that afternoon. And if General Hale would have decided to come and take us over at that moment, he could have destroyed the revolution from the very beginning. But he decided to wait for the night and to attack us in the morning and just decimate us in the morning. And that foolish move of his to not attack is all of a sudden God brings in a cloud, and Washington gets a whole bunch of ferries, and they start putting their horses and all their cannons and everything on it, and they get across the river. And in the morning, after the fog had lifted, the English looked down there right before they were coming to kill us all, and there was not a one of us there. We were gone. And for some reason, and for somehow, God brings this cloud over, and they don't get to see us moving, go through the night or through the morning, until we got every person off of that island. And then there's the big one for me, as I was just reading about it, is Boston, which of course is where it all started. But the English had moved into Boston to kind of settle down the colonies. And so they're all in there, and there's thousands, about, I think I read 7,000 troops in Boston. And now there was a strategic place in Boston, or a little hill that overlooked Boston, but they didn't get up there because they didn't need to, because they were the people in town, and there was no way to get to there because you'd have to go through them to get up there. And of course, in the harbor, they had their ships and their cannons. And George Washington decides that he's going to get up on that hill. And so what they do strategically is they start shooting bombs from the other direction. And they do it for about a month. Every night they just get their cannons, they start shooting into Boston. And so the English look over there and they start shooting back at them. So one night, like all the other nights, they start shooting, and the English are not concerned because our cannons don't do any bad harm, and their cannons don't do any harm. I don't know, we just shoot at each other. And General Hale, he decides to go out and mess around with some girl. He's not concerned. And while they're looking over this way, the Americans go in there and they sneak up on that hill. They get up on top of that hill and they start digging these big old bunkers. And then they start putting logs put in front of them. And by the time the English wake up the next morning, all the Americans are down in these hunkered with cannons. And General Hale looks at that and he said his army, it would have taken over 30 days to do what the Americans did in one night. God protected us. God helped us get up there. And no matter what the battle is, no matter what see, they were so outgunned. They were farmers. They were ranchers. They were nothing as compared to these trained soldiers and all the armaments that they had. But when God be for you, who could be against? The other way it works also. If he be against you, who could be for you? The poor English. I mean, they were going to go down regardless of how many people they had, because God was protecting the American colonies. And he was going to create a nation that he would use for many years after that. So, number one, he knows your name. Number two, he'll fight for you. But number three, he thinks about you. Psalms 139, verse 17. How precious also are thy thoughts unto me, O God. How great is the sum of them. The next scripture is, if I was to count the sands of the seashore, your thoughts to me are more than that. Now, I've never counted the sands in the seashore, because there's a lot of them. And if you think about that he thinks those many thoughts about you, then you have to know that he's thinking a lot about you. My brother and I were in business together, and we always talk about whatever you think about is the thing that grows in your life. Whatever you think about is the thing that grows. So whatever your mind is consumed with, usually if you sow a thought, you'll reap an action. And so oftentimes our minds are consumed with silly things like worry. And thus problems grow in your life. Or you worry about, or you think lustful thoughts and your lust grows. But the opposite is true too. If you think about good things, then the good grows in your life. If you think about how I can serve, then service grows in your life. And it says that he thinks about us as many times as the sands of the seashore. I was thinking about Christmas as the time that I think outside of what I normally think about. And at Christmas time, you're thinking about what can I get my children? What will really bless them? And it's fun how you do that, because now you start thinking, I'm going to get them something really cool. Well, Edie and I, we were working down in Kanab, Utah. We were drilling some oil wells up there in Kanab. And it was a great job for us. We were staying in a hotel. We were making money, crazy amounts of money. But we couldn't get to any of our money because it was deposited in Prescott. And it was a funny time because we were just making a lot of money but couldn't get to any of it. But my daughter, Rita, wanted a Cabbage Patch doll. That was the big thing at the time. There was just a couple of years where that was the craze. Yeah. And we were in this little town of Kanab, Utah, and we didn't have any money, but we wanted to. We thought about how in the world could we bless this girl when we were way out here. And we were just thinking, man, I really want to get her what she wants, which is what we do at Christmas time. And one day we go out, and somehow we had gotten a little money, and we went to the True Value Hardware. And in the midst of their nuts and bolts and wrenches, there was a Cabbage Patch doll. So yay God. Yeah, so we got it, and that's how God's thoughts are for you. He thinks about those things that will help you to grow, those things that will help you to be the man or the woman that he needs you to be. So, he knows your name, he fights for you, he thinks about you, and number 4, he has plans for you. Now this one is really common. For I know the thoughts that I think towards you, saith the Lord, thoughts of peace and not of evil, to give you an expected end. His plans for you are for good and not for harm. He has only good plans. I'm a father, right? So I have children. And, I've never had one bad thought. I've never woke up and said, you know what? I really hate David. I think I'll give him heck today. I've never had a bad thought or thought, man, I really need to just get after him for no good reason, just because he's him. So when God thinks about you, he never has a bad thought or a thought to do you harm or to hurt you in any way. All of his thoughts are good. And plans to help you become the person, the man or the woman that he created you to be. Now, that doesn't mean that everything goes well. We're all older in this room, and so we know that life happens. But what you need to know is that when life is happening, it's always to condition you to become better at what he needs you to be. As a matter of fact, probably a lot of us in this room are going through something right now, and it may seem pretty big to you. But I want you to know that what you're going through now is only to strengthen you so that you can go through what you're going to have to go through next year. Glory. In other words, last year, you were going through something pretty bad. I don't know if you remember last summer, but if you were here last summer, you would have realized that you were probably saying, oh, I don't know, this is pretty bad. I might not make it. And you don't even remember what that is because God did it already. And He got you to where you're at now. I remember when I was teaching my son to swim. I had David out there and I could see that he could swim, that he could breathe, and he liked to hang on to me. He wanted to go wherever I went. And so I knew he could swim. He did not. So I decided I would teach him. So I took him, knowing that if he learned to swim, he could swim with his friends, he could do all things. He could still swim with me, but he was going to get to swim in other places. So I took him and I threw him. And he looked at me, murderer! That trial was only for his good. I had plans for him to swim with someone else besides me. You see what I'm saying? It was way tougher for him than me. I knew he could swim, and if he couldn't swim, I could catch him. I could get him.
I serve you, sir.
I know. Yes. Oh, sorry. Yeah, God is training us. We all know that no pain, no gain. So His plans are always good. And even if you're walking through something tough and you're wondering, where is He? It's about the training that He's giving you so that you can go through the next thing, so that you can become the man and woman of God that He wants you to be. Amen?
Walking on water.
Come on, baby. That's what I'm talking about. Okay, so if He knows your name, and He'll fight for you, He thinks about you, He has plans for you, the number 5, He is your refuge. Number 5, He is your refuge, which is Psalm 62, verses 6 through 8. He is my rock and my salvation, He is my defense. I shall not be moved. In God is my salvation and my glory, the rock of my strength, and my refuge is in God. Trust in Him at all times, ye people. Pour out your heart before Him. God is your refuge. Selah. He is our refuge. He's the anchor in the storm. He's the one place that we can go when the whole world is changing, when everything else is shifting sands, when they're changing verses in Bibles, when there's publishing other stupid stuff. He's the anchor that is unchangeable, unremovable. I was talking to, I was with Melody Green, and her husband was a popular Christian artist years ago, and her husband's name was Keith Green. He'd just recently had gone on a missions trip with Youth with a Mission, and he was just on fire for missions. And he had prayed with some of the leaders, and he said, I want to send out 100,000 young people in this next year. And so his concert, he only had a couple concerts after that, but he was just really on fire. And he was already on fire. I mean, he had homeless people living with him. He opened up his house. He wasn't charging for his albums. He was just kind of a radical guy. And Melody said, she said, I would never say this out loud. It's one of those thoughts that you have, but you know it's not right, so you don't say it. But she said, her and Keith had got saved at the same time. And she goes, and Keith, once he got saved, he just went crazy. He just went off the chart with giving, bringing, and their whole life turned into a ministry rather than what it was before. And so Melody says, in my heart of hearts, I often wondered, if I wasn't married to Keith, I wonder, would I be a believer? Would I be doing this stuff if I wasn't married to the man that I'm married to? And again, she said, I would have never said that to anybody. But she goes, in my heart, I wondered. Now, Keith had some friends over for dinner, and they had never been on an airplane. And Keith had an airplane that he went to concerts with. It's easier to get up to the concerts and get home. And so, as a favor, he wanted to take the family out on a little joy trip where they just fly around the ranch and look at everything. So they go and they get in an airplane, and they actually overload it just because it's just a little fun trip. Anyways, the plane barely gets off the ground and then hits the earth. Melody said that she got a phone call with the secretary or something. There were quite a few people that lived on the ranch. Said, Melody, the plane went down. Of course, she didn't know what that meant. So she hung up the phone and she went running over to the airstrip that they had. And then out of the airstrip, she just went running into the forest where she was trying to find where her husband and 2 of her children, and I think there were about 7 of their friends. She said she got to the fuselage that was on fire and just smoke and everything. She said she got to the fence and it was just on the other side of the fence. She said at the fence, she thought, who else could I go to? Who else is there except for you, God? And at the fence, she answered that question that she had. Would she be a believer without Keith? On that day, she knew there was nowhere else to turn. She had just lost 2 of her children and her husband. And she knew that if she was going to survive what she was walking through, there was only one place she could survive it, and that was with her Lord. And she said, on that day, I knew. I wasn't a believer because of Keith. I was a believer because of what Jesus had done in my life. A man named Horatios Spafford, early 1800s, he was a lawyer in Chicago, and he practiced bankruptcy laws. And during a rough time in American history, there were a lot of people that had gone bankrupt, and Horatio had made a lot of money by buying things that were going under and turning them into rentals. He had quite a few high-rise buildings there in Chicago. As a matter of fact, over a block long of high-rises he had as rentals. He made a lot of money, married the love of his life. He just loved Jesus. And then one year, they had four little girls. And then his wife was pregnant with the 5th one. She gave birth to a little boy. And so Horatio was just head over heels in love with his son that he'd always wanted. Son got sick and didn't survive the illness and passed away. And then shortly after that, there was a great fire in Chicago, and it burned down the whole city. And in that fire burned all the buildings that he owned. And so he went from receiving rent checks from thousands upon thousands of people to no rent checks, but still mortgage payments and no buildings. And so he went from being very wealthy to bankrupt in a short amount of time while they were still grieving about their son. But they decided that it had been a pretty tough year, and so what they were going to do was go to England, where there were going to be some evangelistic crusades, and just kind of get away from it all and spend some time sharing Jesus with other people, and that was their solution. So right before they were to board in New York to float over to England, Horatio got a phone call saying that the city of Chicago was going to have a big meeting, and they wanted Horatio there so they could talk about the rebuilding of Chicago and how to get the Windy City back up on its feet. And so Horatio said, yeah, I'll be there. And so he tells his wife, you guys go ahead and I'll meet with you in about a week. I'll go to this meeting and I'll meet you there on the next boat. So they get out there halfway between the Americas, the United States, and to England, and this boat hits an iceberg, like the Titanic, and it sinks this boat. Fortunately, there was another boat not too far away that was able to save a lot of the passengers, but all 4 of Horatio's daughters died. His wife got onto the boat and made it to England, and she, when it got to England, sent a telegram to Horatio that said, I alone survived. That's all it said. So now Horatio has lost his son, his 4 daughters, his livelihood, his security, and his wife is in England all by herself in the hospital, and he's beside himself. So he gets on a on the next ship going to England, and he's floating there. And when he gets to about the place where they had hit the iceberg, the captain of the ship called him up to his quarters, and he said, "Horatio, this is where it happened, right about, these are the coordinates of where it all happened." Horatio looked, and he thanked the captain, and he went down to his room, and he wrote down his first poem and his last poem that he would ever write. And evidently, a peace came over him while he was watching the seas, the rough seas, and knowing his children had lost their lives. Rather than looking at the circumstance, somehow he was able to look at God. And when he looked at God, there was a peace that came over him. There was a flood that filled his heart. And so he began to write in his chambers there a song, or a poem at the time, that we would sing for the next couple hundred years. The words went like this: "When peace like a river attendeth my way, when sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever my lot, thou hast taught me to say, it is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. Though Satan should buffet and trials should come, let the blessed assurance control that God hath regarded my helpless estate. Thou hast shed his own blood for my soul. It is well with my soul." In the place where he was at, there was the peace of God, that anchor that flooded his soul and gave him peace, that he wrote down these words, which these words have brought comfort to us for these next couple hundred years. Funny when I was coming over here I was praying about speaking with you guys. I said, "Lord, I know there's a lot of songs out there, but I ask that you would play this song at this church. Of the millions and millions and millions of songs, your third song was a new rendition of It Is Well With My Soul." God wants you to know that he is the anchor in which you can trust. He is your refuge. When times of difficulty come, he is the very thing that can sustain you through it, which is different from a person that has no hope. But for us that have hope, he is that anchor. So if he knows your name, he fights for you, he thinks about you, has plans for you, he's your refuge in times of storm. Number 6, and my final point, is he is always with you. Matthew 28, verse 20. Matthew 28, verse 20. "Teaching them to observe all things, whatsoever I have commanded to you, and lo, I am with you always, even unto the end of the world." When I first became a believer, I was raised Catholic, and I understood the awe of God. I understood that he was big, that he was strong, that he was mighty, and I really didn't understand this whole thing that Protestants always talked about, a personal relationship. You have a personal relationship with God. And I just couldn't understand it, and I was just, to be honest with you, too honest to say that I could. Because I understood, because I know the English language, I understand the word personal, and I know the word relationship. And though I knew that God was big and mighty, created the world, personal I wouldn't say, or relationship I wouldn't say. And the funny thing is that most Protestants that I met I didn't think had one either. See, I have a personal relationship with Edie, my wife. I know a lot about her. I know her good things, I know her bad things. And if you ever asked me to witness about her, I wouldn't have a hard time. I wouldn't be going, "Oh, okay, ready. Be instant, in and out of season. Get ready." No, I would tell you that Edie was in California. She just helped deliver a baby a couple of days ago. I mean, it would be easy for me to tell you about her because of my relationship with her. Because I spend a lot of time with her, and I know who she is. And so, I couldn't understand, I just couldn't get it, what these Protestants meant by personal relationship until I gave my life to Jesus. And all of a sudden, he began to show himself to me, especially as I began to show myself to him. Because now I was praying, and I was reading, and I was learning, and I was growing. And I found that he was a friend in good times and in bad, when I was sick or when I was healthy, whether I had money or I was broke. He became my friend. not too long ago, I was in the mission field for many years, and I came home. And I was a little bit worried about that, because on the mission field, God had done great things. And I was most worried about what my relationship would become if I wasn't out on the mission field, if I wasn't doing things. Would Jesus be the same? And again, like Melody, I wouldn't say that because I know the right answer. But I was really kind of worried about it secretly. And I got home, and I really didn't quite know what to do or where to work or what to, and I decided I was going to start a little laundry company, which is, I was going to put washers and dryers, coin-ops, in apartments. I was going to put them in RV parks, hotels, wherever there's coin-ops. And what I would do is I would go over and put them in places and take care of the machines and collect the money, give half of the money to the owners of the building, and I would just start that way. So I'm doing this. I really don't know much about business or sales or anything like that. But I walked into an apartment complex that had 130 units, and I said, "Do you guys have laundry machines here?" And the owner was a lady. She looked at me and she goes, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, I'm just starting a company where we'd like to take your old machines, take them out, put in new machines, and I'll send you a check each month." And she looked at me, and this was her response: "Are you an angel sent from God?" And I said, "Well, I can see how you get that mixed up." But I said no, and she goes, "Let me tell you my story." She goes, she was a daughter of a Baptist minister. She'd been married for many, many years, and she just recently got divorced. And in her marriage, her husband had built apartment complexes, and she never really messed much with what he was doing, and he didn't mess much with what she was doing. And so in the divorce hearing, they got before lawyers and a judge, and they were talking about dividing assets. And so what they did is he had an apartment complex in Flagstaff and an apartment complex in Prescott. So the judge put a line. He said, "You get this one, you get this one." And so all of a sudden she became an owner of an apartment complex, but had never once ever been around him, although her husband had every day. So she moves to Prescott, goes to a hotel. She lives in Phoenix, so she came up to Prescott to take care of this new thing. And she was scared to death, didn't know what to do. And in that quiet time that morning, that Monday morning that I came, she was having quiet time, and she said, "Lord, I have no idea what to do. I don't know anything about what I'm supposed to do." She goes, "I'm just going to write a list, and I need you to help me with this list." She goes, "Number one, the laundry rooms. All the machines are broken. I have no money to fix any of them. I have to have laundry machines. I need you to send me someone that could help me with the laundry." 2 hours later, I walk in the room and say, I realized that the God that I served on the mission field was the God that I was going to serve in Prescott. He wasn't going to change. He was going to watch over Edie and I just the way he had in every other place. The reason you should trust today is because he knows your name. He'll fight for you. He thinks about you. He has plans. He's your refuge. And mostly, he's your constant companion. He's your friend. I'd like to close, if it's possible, with that third song. Could I have the worship team come back up and let's sing that song one more time? I just asked. Excuse me.
Your job is never done.
seas that are shaken and stirred can be calmed and broken from my regard. Through it all, my eyes are on you. And through it all, it is well. And through it all, my eyes are on you. And it is well with me. Far be it from me to not believe, even when my eyes can't see. And this mountain that's in front of me will be thrown into the midst of the sea. And through it all, my eyes are on you. And through it all, it is well. And through it all, my eyes are on you. And it is well. It is well. So let go, my soul, and trust in Him. The waves and wind still know His name. So let go, my soul, and trust in Him. The waves and wind still know His name. And it is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. It is well. It is well with my soul. It is my soul. And through it all, my eyes are on you. And it is well with me.
Thank you, Randy, very much. It was awesome. It was awesome.